Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're doing some massive accounting, literally on a planetary scale. We are diving into a deeply fascinating alternative scientific framework called the Unified Theory of Geologic History, or UTGH. Instead of looking at geology and astronomy as completely separate disciplines, this framework treats them as a single massive cosmic ledger that absolutely has to balance. It is a wildly different way to view the history of our solar system, and we're going to break down its core arguments today purely by following the math.
To structure our audit, we're going to hit 5 key areas. First, looking at a cosmic crime scene. Next, the Earth rupture hypothesis. Then, balancing the mass ledger. Checking the isotopic fingerprint. And finally, closing the balance.
Let's jump right into part 1, a cosmic crime scene. Is the solar system wearing Earth's fingerprints?
The author of this framework asks us to completely flip our perspective. What if the anomalies we see out there, unexpected water on moons or massive deep canyons, aren't just random, isolated puzzles? The text proposes they're actually evidence of a single catastrophic event. Basically, it treats the solar system like a massive crime scene, and the evidence, well, it's just sitting there, waiting to be cataloged.
Now here is the absolute foundation of the whole theory. It's if this, then that architecture. The UTGH operates on very strict conditional logic. It states that if the pre-catastrophe Earth's radius shrank by exactly 46 kilometers following a massive collapse of its crust, then an enormous, highly specific amount of mass, 2.9 times 10 to the 22nd power kilograms, literally had to go somewhere. It must be mathematically accounted for. In physics, mass doesn't just vanish, right? We have to balance the ledger.
Moving on to Section 2, the Earth rupture hypothesis. Let's find that missing mass.
So, according to the math in the UTGH, we're looking for 2.9 times 10 to the 22nd kilograms. That staggering number is the total reservoir mass that was supposedly expelled when the pre-flood Earth's crust collapsed inward. To kind of wrap our heads around that, we're talking about 0.5% of Earth's entire current mass. That is roughly the mass of a small moon, or the dwarf planet Pluto, just instantly displaced.
How does that even happen? Well, the theory gives us a very specific mechanical sequence. Step 1, an underground layer of pressurized water acts like structural support for the crust. Step 2, a catastrophic rupture violently releases all that pressure. Step 3, with the support gone, the crust falls inward, physically shrinking Earth's radius. And finally, Step 4, because of the conservation of angular momentum, the Earth spins faster. Think of a spinning figure skater pulling her arms in to rotate quicker. The framework claims this specific geometric collapse is what changed Earth's historical 360-day year into the 365.25-day year we have today.
And the engine behind this whole thing? Supercritical water. Now, we're not just talking about really hot water here. This is a highly pressurized fluid phase found deep, deep underground. Down there, the extreme temperature and pressure basically erase the line between a liquid and a gas. The framework argues that it was the sudden, incredibly violent evacuation of this supercritical water that triggered the massive crustal collapse.
Which brings us to Section 3, balancing the mass ledger. It's time for the grand cosmic audit.
We can actually visualize our ledger by splitting it into 2 main accounts. The bigger slice, about 1.9 times 10 to the 22nd kilograms, is what we call the retained fraction. That's the mass that stayed trapped right here in Earth's gravity well. The second slice, exactly 10 to the 22nd kilograms, is the escape velocity fraction. That's the material that shot out with so much force it completely escaped Earth's gravitational pull. Let's look at that retained fraction first. The framework says this mass is literally all around us right now. It makes up our current surface oceans, the polar ice caps, and the water that's been absorbed into our sedimentary rock layers. A chunk of it was also reabsorbed deep into the crust and mantle when the planet compressed. So boom, that perfectly balances the terrestrial side of the ledger. But to finish this cosmic audit, we have to track down the rest of it. We need to find this specific number, 10 to the 22nd power kilograms. That's the exact amount of water, rock, and organic material that the geometry says achieved escape velocity. If the UTGH is right, this exact amount of mass has to be sitting somewhere out there in the solar system. And this is where the framework basically turns the solar system into a massive spreadsheet. The UTGH claims we can find the exact deposits of this missing mass sitting on other celestial bodies. We're talking about the preserved water networks on Mars, the huge subsurface ocean on Jupiter's moon Europa, Saturn's icy rings, the water vapor actively venting out of Enceladus, and even those polar ice caches on Mercury.
The framework argues, hey, those aren't native features, that's the debris from Earth's rupture.
So the key takeaway here is a total departure from the standard model. Instead of a slow, gradual accumulation of water over billions of years from random comet impacts, the UTGH argues for a sudden, massive, single-episode deposit, straight from Earth's account into the rest of the solar system.
All right, Section 4, the isotopic fingerprint, tracking the evidence.
So how do we prove this water actually came from Earth? Well, the framework relies on a specific isotopic fingerprint called the D/H ratio. That's the ratio of deuterium, or heavy hydrogen, to ordinary hydrogen. Since water forms under totally different conditions all across the galaxy, this D/H ratio acts like a chemical barcode. It tells us exactly where and how a specific batch of water was created.
The UTGH argues that if we look at the DH ratios of certain comets and asteroids, specifically Jupiter family comets, they carry the exact diagnostic signature of Earth's deep subcrustal water. The framework highlights that we see a heterogeneous distribution outspace, meaning some comets have that typical primordial space water signature, sure, but others, they perfectly match the predicted chemical barcode of an Earth origin injection.
And here is what makes this so compelling from an evidence standpoint. The data backing this up wasn't collected by people trying to prove the UTGH, not at all. It was gathered by independent NASA and European Space Agency missions for totally unrelated reasons. Yet, the author argues that when you pull all this independent data together, it unifies into a single, undeniable signature pointing straight back to that one catastrophic day.
Finally, Section 5, closing the balance when three methods converge.
The framework is really adamant that this isn't just one lucky calculation. It relies on three completely independent mathematical ledgers converging perfectly. Number one, geometric volume, calculating the mass evacuated based on Earth's shrinking radius. Number two, solar system inventory, adding up the water and ice out in space, which matches the predicted escape fraction. And number three, terrestrial evidence, where the physical volume of massive collapsed chambers on Earth, like those incredibly deep ocean trenches, perfectly matches the retained volume.
It's summed up brilliantly in this quote from the text. The calendar told us how much Earth shrank. The geometry tells us how much volume was evacuated. The solar system tells us where the escaping fraction came to rest. So if this framework holds up, the historical calendar changing from 360 to 365 days, our physical geology, and the solar system's water inventory are literally just different ledgers recording the exact same cosmic transaction.
The author hammers home this final point. Because these numbers were all derived independently, without artificially tweaking them to fit one another, they represent a correctly identified physical phenomenon. The mass inventory flawlessly balances. It closes precisely at 10 to the 22nd kilograms on both sides of the equation.
Which leaves us with an incredibly provocative thought experiment to wrap up this explainer. If upcoming space missions keep discovering water and ice on distant moons that carry Earth's exact isotopic fingerprint, will the scientific community be forced to rethink how we balance the solar system's mass? It's a question that totally changes how you look at the night sky. The stars aren't just distant mysteries anymore. They might actually be holding the scattered pieces of our own planet's history. Thanks so much for tuning in. Keep questioning, keep crunching those numbers, and I'll catch you in the next explainer.